My name is Matthew Makak, and this is Room 51, where we talk about all things board gaming. And today I am joined by a special guest from What They Never Told Us podcast, Sasha Pantzialas. Did I say that right?
You said it perfectly. Thank you. My family would be so proud. Fun fact, my family is the only people in the world with that last name that I know of as of yet. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to look into this. I might not.
If you find Pantzialas, you'll find family. 100%.
I will stalk the Sasha family. All right. Awesome. Today we are doing a mind over meta. So this is essentially where I am a licensed mental health counselor. Sasha's a licensed mental health counselor.
Yes, I am.
And I like to take the wonderful world of psychology and mesh it together with the wonderful world of board gaming. And that's what we're doing here today. And what we're specifically talking about is how play elevates the mind. And more specifically, we're talking about how playing board games can elevate the mind. Although we could talk about it in a broader sense. But fun fact is, Sasha doesn't really play board games.
That's not true. So I was thinking about that's I don't play. I play like older board games, like old people board games, like Rummy Cube.
Rummy Cube, yeah.
I love Rummy Cube. I love things that make me think. I love Scrabble.
Yes.
I'm kind of like a loser in that sense. Like nothing, I'm not a fantasy kind of person. Never had an imaginary friend. I've always been very like based in reality, but I love things that make me think. And if I win, oh my God, I'm super competitive. So Lord help the people who play with me.
That's very different from Justin and I. We used to be very competitive. I used to be super competitive, but nowadays we're just like, let's play games for fun. Like it doesn't really matter who wins, who cares. But yeah, I'm super like into fantasy, sci-fi, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so what I was really talking about was like hobby board games, not to be like an elitist, that's not what I mean to be. But yes, you're talking about like more mass market games that you like to play, which is cool. I think Categories is dope. And so is Rummy Cube. But how does this elevate the mind, right? So I was actually just curious in terms of from where you're coming from as somebody who plays like the more mass market games, right? How you feel that like by playing these games, it actually challenged you, because you were saying that you like to think, and when you win, you really love it. So how does that sort of like, challenge your mind and everything?
Well, if you really think about it, when you're playing any kind of board game, whether it's fantasy or just like these market games that I like to play, right? Mass market games. You think about the mental skills and the cognitive skills that are needed to play these games. And the earlier you start doing this with children, I mean, when it comes to development, their mental, like their motor skills, their cognitive skills, they're developing at a rapid rate. When I think it's super, super rapid up until they're like 5-6 years old. Okay. So imagine you're playing board games with them and you're helping them attain like motor skills and manage time and, help them kind of focus on their attention, learning how to plan, remembering details. And then also they're learning social skills while they're engaging in this, development of whatever motor and mental cognitive skills that their brain is like connecting, like the neurons are connecting at that moment. If that made sense. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, it totally made sense to me. You mentioned motor skills. What are motor skills?
It's basically like your actual functioning within yourself, right? Like being able to move pieces, like think about Monopoly and think about how small like the thimble is, right? Like think about when you're 6'7" trying to move it. And then as opposed to now, like we've polished those skills, right? It's so easy. But when you're younger, those things aren't for like firsthand nature. They're not secondhand nature. Scratch that. When you're younger, those things aren't secondhand nature to you, right? You have to develop these skills. So it's about building autonomy within your own physical self, as well as, physical self in actually managing the pieces. One, physical self with regards to your parents, right? Mm-hmm. If you're playing with your family, so you're no longer looking towards mom and dad, you're trying to beat them, right? Yeah. So now you're your own person. So it's helping you gain autonomy in a very mental kind of way, and just gaining skills to basically function on your own and think on your own, as well as think about other people, right? So like being in the minds of other people, because essentially the whole, maybe this is bad to set up with children, but the whole point is to win, or maybe I was taught wrong.
I don't know.
I think
So
so.
you think so? You think so? Yeah. I really like what you were talking about in terms of like learning autonomy in games. And this is going to be fun because you don't quite know like all the terminology in board games, so I could like bring that into it, and you know all the like psychology terms and everything, so you can bring that into it. So there's this genre called Euro games, right? And it's very much about you. A lot of times these games are sort of, they don't quite have a theme in them, although that's changing nowadays. But anyway, so they have some sort of theme, but the mechanisms of the game don't usually match the theme. Okay. And so when you're going through, you're trying to either gain a bunch of resources, or you're gaining money, or whatever it might be, right? There's a bunch of things called like worker placement. You're picking actions that you're going to take. And essentially you're on your own, right? Like you are making those choices, and there's little to no luck involved. That's the main point of Euro games. So whatever choice you make, whether you end up winning, losing, whatever, it's because you did it, right? So that sense of autonomy really comes through. And I know you were talking about children, but I would go as far as to say that board games can even help adults, right?
Yeah.
In terms of autonomy, because so many times we kind of feel like we're not autonomous beings, like somebody's telling us what to do and all this sort of stuff. But in these moments, like you get to decide your fate, which is something really cool. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, I love the fact that you brought up the difference between, you know, being a child and being an adult, and how it's still beneficial, because I have this theory. It's not in the psychology books, but I have this theory that when it comes to development, it's a cyclical rotation, right? So we're developing autonomy, we're developing how to be with people, we're always developing and fine tuning these skills as we get older and within different contexts of our lives. So building autonomy is a thing, is even if you couldn't build it when you were younger, right? Because, and I do think playing board games is one way of practicing that, recognizing like, oh, I can win, because it feels good to win. Because especially in those Euro games that you were discussing, you're essentially doing something for yourself, right? If you know you're the one who's if you're the one who's basically leading your success, that makes you feel good, and you can bring that in other places of your life. Even though it's playing, this is still something that you want. It's still something that, you know, you had a goal in mind and you reached it, and therefore you can keep practicing it in other spaces of your life. So I think it's super essential. I wish adults in general would play more, and I don't just mean board games. Yeah, I just mean like, sometimes I feel like a damn child in this world. And I realize that adults take themselves so seriously, but talking about play, it's almost as if we forget to be creative and live in this very unstructured way, where yes, you have autonomy over the self, but anything goes. And I think that creates a lot of, and again, this is not in the research, so don't quote me, but I personally believe that that's what creates like depression or anxiety, this need to always fit in this fixed plan, not being able to budge. It's so detrimental to us as a society, and it doesn't do us well. Like we should just take days where we're all playing together, like literally. Whatever it is, right? Like whatever play means to you.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say actually that it is in the studies, what you're talking about. In terms of now I'm just thinking about like LGBTQ plus stuff, because that's what I'm always thinking about. But like the studies show that when you're like forced to fit inside certain boxes and molds, and you don't get to like be outside of that, it causes depression, anxiety, right? Attempts to take your own life, comes up.
Mm-hmm.
So and then when you have board games where you kind of get to do what you want to do, that is amazing, right? And when we talk about elevating the mind, we're not just talking about like um intelligence or IQ or anything like that. It's about also just your mental health, your mental well-being. um and so I would also say, because you did mention back that the ultimate goal of the game is to win. Um, and I would say that the goal, sure, of the game is to win, but the purpose is to have fun. And
Yes.
so um, within that, I have played plenty of games where I've actually reached my goal in the game, but I lost. For example, one of my favorite games of all time is Caverna. And in this game, you are creating your own farm and cave system and everything, and a dwelling for your dwarven family, right? So, which is really cool. And you get to do whatever you want in this game. It's sort of sandbox-ish. Justin would kill me about saying that, but that's a whole other story. Um, but I love it where I'm like, I'm going to be the ultimate miner of this game, and I could go off, do that, be an awesome miner, and it's like, yeah. But I lost the game. But to me, I don't even care. I'm like, yeah, but look what I did. I have all these rubies, you know.
Mm.
So for me, that's cool. It's like I got to do what I wanted, and that could be really relieving in a world where we are constantly told that we have to do certain things like our job and being a person you're not, and having
Mhm.
to protect yourself, be hyper vigilant, where in these little worlds that we create while playing board games, you don't have to worry about those things.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were saying that, yes, you're so to your point, you're right. The purpose should be to have fun. And the fact that for me, the purpose isn't to have fun, it shows you a little bit of how I grew up and who I am.
Oh snap.
Yeah, that has to do with like my environment and the pressure I put on myself or was put on me, and now it's internalized. I've also been reading a lot on LGBTQ communities and how the community is treated and how that affects individually people's mental health who identify within that community. And a lot of the times, the research explores how they grew up in their family and how validated they were with regards to their identity. And if they weren't validated, essentially it's almost like neglect because of the fact that that piece of you is not being acknowledged. And when a piece of you isn't being acknowledged, it's almost as if it's like taking on a slow death, depending on how you feed it. And if you're not feeding it properly, if you're not finding spaces to have yourself validated and for you to feel affirmed in who you are, that can be so detrimental. It's basically the equivalent of trauma
Yeah.
and how we experience the world. So then you're if a piece of you isn't seen, right, or validated, you're going to experience the world as a very dangerous place. And I also think that this is why board games could also be so fundamental for different groups, not just the LGBTQ plus community, but so many different marginalized groups, people who usually feel in the outs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you usually have people in spaces where they accept you, not because of the other parts of your identity, but because of this thing that we all agree upon that we're going to play. We want
Yeah.
to engage. We want to have fun. And that's a huge part of our identity. And just lastly, I think that we should see our identity more as something that we do, the things that we do, right? The things, our hobbies, our interests, as opposed to the things that we are and like what you see
Mm-hmm.
at first sight, because it's so invalidating because we're so much more than the groups we identify with. I think
Mm-hmm.
we are what we do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. We are what we do, right? Like we started off the video like I'm a licensed mental health counselor, right? And I think that shows a lot about who we are, right?
Mhm.
And it's because of what we do. And I like that you were talking about seeing yourself in places and how that could lead to neglect. So play can actually be something detrimental as well, right?
Mm.
So I'm thinking even like kids at the playground, like, hey, I want to play with you. It's like, no, you can't play with me. Bullying,
Mhm.
whatever. But when it comes to board games, uh, we talk here on in Room 51 a lot about just diversity and inclusivity in board games, right? Showing different kinds of people in board games. And a lot of times we'll get backlash in terms of like, well, it's just a game. It doesn't matter, whatever. But it does matter, right?
It so matters.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Can you actually talk a little bit about that and why it matters?
It matters because I think that, so for the people, I 1000% support you, not just because I'm biased towards you, right? Because you're a great person, but because of, I believe in what you believe in 1000%. And it's not just a belief. I actually think it's a way of the world. I wish more people thought that way. I feel like I'm going to get backlash for this. Yeah. So, when it's very easy for people to say, oh, that doesn't matter. This is just fantasy. It's just a game. But when you're in that position, I really urge people who are finding themselves say these things, I want them to recognize that they're coming from a place of privilege where they're not being bothered, right? And when you come from a place of privilege, that means that you don't have access to others' experiences because you're feeling comfortable. But just because you're comfortable doesn't mean other people are comfortable. A lot of these games, a lot of what representation means is so important because it's very hard to see yourself get to a place where you say you want to be if you don't have people who look like you, who do similar things as you in that position, because you're already feeling excluded, especially if you come from underserved like communities or marginalized communities. So with that exclusion, it affects your psychology every day. It's less likely that you're going to pursue the thing that you want if you don't have somebody who has done it before you, right? Yeah. And shout out to all the trailblazers out there, because I don't know how they did it, right? Like, I don't know if I would have that courage, but you think about the necessity for everybody to be in these spaces so that you can chase the thing that you're interested in. It's super important, even if it's just to have fun, because something as simple as not being represented can exclude you from having fun. And that's just the psychology behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. And having fun is so important because if you can't have fun, why are you even living? So yeah.
That's a conversation for another day.
That's a whole other, that's another episode. But yeah, awesome. So really quick, before we wrap up here, I want to do something. I wanted to try to, I don't know, something new, because you're not into board games, and I don't know. I love talking to people who are not into it, and then just figuring out what they might like.
Okay.
So I wanted to end off with trying to figure out what board game I think that you might like and might want to check out.
Okay.
Not that you have to, right? This is not to be like, you must play board games. But I'm just kind of curious. So would you mind just telling me a little bit about like what you liked in these other games that you spoke about earlier on?
Okay, so Rummy Cube, I like the fact that you have to think like 5 steps ahead, especially when you get into the game, because you're trying to maneuver pieces and you're trying to follow the rules of the game. And so I like that. Scrabble's the same thing. You have to think ahead. You can't just, like, you start off without really knowing where it's headed, but once you're in a specific place of the game, then you start thinking ahead, like, oh, I can't use this tile because I want to save it and I want triple word as opposed to just triple letter or no triple, right? I like, I even like Uno because of that, right? Like, I save my I always say +4 and people make fun of me. They're like, oh, you're so Latina. It's what is it, add 4 plus I say +4. I save my +4 to like hit them with it on the last, when people have 1 card left. Like, it's always like a strategy for me. I like strategic games.
Okay. Yeah. Honestly, I feel like you would love the Eurogame genre. So okay, I have an idea in my head. I just have to remember what the heck this game is called. Justin actually has it. People in the comments, let me know if you think this is a good game for Sasha based off what she said. And also if you have any sort of what's it called, suggestions. But my suggestion is paperback. So if you just type in paperback board game, this is a deck building type of game. And because you mentioned Scrabble, right, and Uno and Rummikub, right? So it's got cards. You're using them. You're using them to make words and everything, but you're also like building your deck of letters.
Okay.
And with this deck, like you could get more and more points. So it's all about strategy in terms of like, okay, I want to buy that letter, I want to buy this letter, that way I can make this word and all that sort of stuff. So it's really, really cool. I think you should check it out,
Oh
and we'll
well.
see. Yeah,
I'm gonna buy it on Amazon and
you're gonna buy it. Wow.
yeah,
Okay,
of course. Why
paperback. Did
not?
you hear that? um
I'll keep you
uh
posted.
yeah, keep me posted. Let me know how you like it. If you need any help figuring out how to play, let me know. But I think it's pretty introductory friendly, I would say.
Okay.
So that was also something I was trying to think about. But yeah, so thank you so much, Sasha, for joining me today. I know we went a little bit on a rant of like inclusivity and everything, but that is part of elevating the mind, I would say. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Because if you
So
don't, then you're putting limitations. I have to say it. If you don't, then you're putting limitations on somebody, and
yeah,
therefore on their mind, their sense of
exactly. There's
self.
there's no there's no elevation there. Um, so where can people find you?
Okay, so I am co-host of a podcast called What They Never Told Us. And Matthew here actually was on episode 47 of our podcast if you want to go check that out. But you can definitely find us on the podcast, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. And you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Never Told Us Pod. And if you just want to write me or my co-host Crystal, if you like what you're hearing, you can send us an email at nevertolduspod@gmail.com.
Oh, cool. Yes, definitely like listen to their podcast. It's super awesome. They talk about all kinds of mental health stuff. And yeah, so this has been Room 51. This has been another Mind Over Meta. If you like this video, go ahead, give us a like. If you really like our channel, go ahead, click that subscribe button. And if you hate us, I am surprised you made it this far. We'll catch you next time.